Hello dolls, and welcome back to another video. Today I would like to talk about the woman who really much was one of the women who made me fall in love with the 1960s. She was such a bright soul. I adore her fashion, the way she acted and everything that she did, but her life was very tragically cut short, and the way that she died was very largely publicized, and as a result of that, nowadays most people just know her for the way that she died. So today I would like to tell you about the life of Sharon Tate. I want to tell you about her childhood, her way to Hollywood, how she started acting, the people that were closest to her, and just her entire life story, because I feel like it is such a shame how she's often degraded to a Manson family victim, which she was, but she was just so much more than that. This is probably going to be quite the long video. Sharon Tate was the one who sparked the idea to launch the Dolls Pod, the podcast that I host with my dear friend Abby, where we talk about women of the 1960s and 70s every other week. And this was the first episode. However, I kind of tweaked the script, took some parts out, put some new parts in, because I really wanted to retell her story with pictures, with music, with all of these incredible things to just kind of give you an idea of who she was. Because it still breaks my heart that no matter on which platform you enter her name, the first thing that comes is the way that she died. So today I would like to reclaim a little bit of Sharon Tate's legacy as the incredible actress, woman, and friend that she was. She was the girl you couldn't quite touch, all candlelight and Californian sunshine, with a voice like a whisper, and eyes that always seemed to be looking just past you, as if she knew something you didn't. Sharon Tate wasn't born famous. She didn't storm into Hollywood. She drifted in like a breeze through gauze curtains, soft and golden and impossibly lovely. A beauty queen's daughter, raised on army bases, Sharon moved through the world with a strange, weightless grace, part small-town sweetheart, part screen siren from some other realm. She was the kind of beautiful that made people lose their words. Directors didn't know what to do with her. Photographers tried to pin her down in pictures, but she always seemed just out of reach, as if she'd evaporate if you stared too long. In the late 1960s, as the world twisted into something darker, Sharon Tate became something like a symbol of innocence, of beauty, of everything Hollywood promised and never quite delivered. But she was more than a myth, more than a tragedy. She laughed easily. She cursed like a sailor. She was deeply, messily alive. And though history would try to trap her in its headlines, this isn't a story about what happened on that terrible August night. This is the story of the years before, the life she lived, the dreams she chased, the love she gave. It's the story of Sharon as she really was, vibrant, tender, and brilliant in the way stars are just before they fall. Chapter 1. California Dream Born in Texas. Sharon Marie Tate entered the world in Dallas, Texas on January 24th of 1943 as the cherished first child of Paul Tate, affectionately known as PJ, a dedicated career military officer, and his wife Doris. Their union, just shy of a year when Sharon arrived, was imbued with hopes and dreams for their precious daughter, whom they believed to be the epitome of beauty and grace. Little did they know their sentiments were shared by many, even beyond their immediate circle. Among Sharon's admirers was PJ's mother, whose adoration for her granddaughter truly knew no bounds. This fondness led her to submit photographs of 6-month-old Sharon to a local toddler beauty contest, resulting in the prestigious title of Miss Tiny Tot of Dallas and a $50 savings bond. I feel like bonds are not a thing that people do anymore, but back then, this was a huge thing, and it was a thing not only for children but also for young women to make a little bit of money if they wanted to go to college. The accolade was not only a testament of Sharon's undeniable charm, but also a source of pride for the Tate family. Quote, "When I was in school, I dreamed about becoming a psychiatrist or a ballerina. Like most girls, I would dream about being a movie star too, but those dreams are the impossible kind, the kind you don't really set your heart on," Sharon later said. Amidst these moments of joy, the Tate family faced their fair share of challenges, particularly during Sharon's early childhood. With PJ deployed in the throes of war, Doris found herself shouldering the responsibilities of parenthood largely on her own. And something that weighed quite heavy on her was how prone Sharon was to mysterious illnesses, which often led her mother to feeling helpless and anxious. Despite numerous visits to the hospitals and consultations with medical experts, the root cause of Sharon's ailments just remained elusive. It was during one harrowing episode, marked by a particularly high fever, that Doris made a pivotal decision. Following her motherly gut instinct, she decided to take Sharon home from the hospital and nurse her back to health on her own. As the specter of the Cold War loomed large and PJ's military obligations demanded frequent relocations, the Tate family found themselves traversing the breadth of the nation. Each move brought with it a mix of excitement and apprehension as they grappled with the uncertainties of military life against the backdrop of global tensions. Sharon remembered, quote, "I guess you could say that I was somewhat withdrawn from my classmates. I spent a good deal of time being a loner. I suppose that had something to do with the way we lived, always on the move, never living in one town very long. It's very hard to make lasting friendships that way. And my father was rather strict with me and my two younger sisters. He insisted on proper behavior and very often vetoed our choices of boyfriends. There was always a curfew whenever my sisters or I would go out on a date. We had to be home on time or else. But I never resented his authority. In fact, I'm thankful for my strict upbringing. I feel as it helped me learn discipline, and that's very important in this business." Growing up with her parents as the steadfast pillars in her life, Sharon cultivated a deep and intimate bond with both of them. This close bond between the family members took new dimensions when, at the age of 9, Sharon welcomed her little sister Deborah into the world. 5 years later, the family expanded once again with the arrival of their third daughter, Patty. The warmth and hospitality exuded by the Tate household became a reoccurring theme in the recollections of those who crossed their path with Sharon and her family. Sharon herself was often described as embodying the same kindness and beauty attributed to her mother, a testament to the nurturing environment in which she was raised. As Sharon transitioned into her teenage years, her growing confidence and allure found expression in the realm of beauty pageants. With a string of victories under her belt, including titles such as Miss Richland and Miss Odorama, Sharon's star began to rise. Her undeniable charm and poise caught the attention of both admirers and industry insiders. Chapter 2: The American Girl in Verona. The trajectory of Sharon's life took a momentous turn when her father was reassigned to Italy. It was there, amidst the picturesque backdrop of this Mediterranean country, that Sharon enrolled in Vicenza American High School. In 1960, fate intervened, in the form of a magazine cover shoot for Stars and Stripes, catapulting Sharon into the spotlight. Clad in quintessentially American attire, a one-piece swimsuit, a cowboy hat, and boots, she radiated an aura of dreamy beauty that captured the imagination of advertising and film executives alike. Sharon's allure didn't go unnoticed by the movie industry, particularly when famed entertainer Pat Boone descended upon Italy to film his summer special. Talent scouts were sent out to the American high school to recruit teenagers, and that is where they met Sharon. Drawn to her magnetic presence, they wasted no time in recruiting her for the production. While initially hesitant, Sharon's parents eventually agreed, allowing her to make her first steps into the acting world. It was the beginning of a wonderful career, with Sharon's devoted mother Doris by her side for each step of the way. Doris later recalled, quote, "The next day, Sharon came out of the costume trailer all dolled up. A tailored blue satin dress with a matching wide-brimmed hat made her the prettiest girl on the set, until a gusting wind ripped away the hat and wildly tossed her hair into a gnarled mess. The shoot was equally disastrous. The gale force pushed the canal waves over the boat's edges, soaking the occupants, and made Sharon seasick for days after. God knows why, but the experience of the Boone Show hooked Sharon on the entertainment industry." During the next couple of months, Sharon starred as an extra in multiple films filmed across Italy, and while working on a film titled Adventures of a Young Man, she began dating actor Richard Beymer. Famous for his part as Tony in the absolute classic West Side Story, and later and probably more known to younger people for playing Audrey Horne's dad in Twin Peaks, Richard had quite the standing in Hollywood. Soon the two started going out, and Richard won the Tate sympathy. That was before they found out that he was promoting her to go to Hollywood. Her mother recalled the scene. Sharon said, "Richard said he'll introduce me to his agent in California. Maybe after college," PJ said absently. "I'm not going to college. I'm going to California," she timidly announced. That caught his attention. "The hell you are!" The odds tipped in Sharon's favor. PJ received his next assignment. Wouldn't you know it, we were going to San Pedro, California, just south of Los Angeles. The news of the transfer led to a compromise. Sharon could go to California 2 months ahead of the family, under the condition that she attended college while pursuing an acting career. Even later on, she always credited Richard for convincing her to go to Hollywood, saying, quote, "Richard told me I should be in pictures, and I believed him." Chapter 3. Back to the Land of Stars. With her whole family now being in California, Sharon was ready to take on Hollywood by storm. But despite her connections and good looks, her big break didn't happen right away. She auditioned for several parts, but nothing really seemed to work out for her. That was until she attended a casting for a part in Petticoat Junction, where Marty Ransohoff, the head of Filmways, saw her and signed her on the spot. And Ransohoff had one clear plan. He wanted to make Sharon a star. Soon her days were filled with acting lessons by Lee Strasberg, singing, dancing, walking, talking, and just like that, 3 years went by. But Sharon still needed an agent, so she decided to sign with Richard's agent, a man named Harold Gefsky. And when he spoke about Sharon later, he said the following. Sharon was an open, honest, smart, and straightforward person, one of the most beautiful people I have ever met in my life. And always, I can't emphasize on how beautiful she was, inside and out. Sharon was well educated and impressed people with her honesty. She never changed from the time she arrived in Hollywood until the day she left us. Soon Sharon found work in commercials and continued modeling to support herself, sharing an apartment with fellow actress Sheila Wells, which was small and a little cramped since each of the girls also had their dogs living with them. Sharon enjoyed the independence of living alone. The two girls became friends, and Sharon actually even introduced Sheila to her husband later on. And they spent a lot of time together and out on town. When talking about Sharon, Sheila said, quote, "Sharon was so overwhelmingly, so incredibly beautiful that anyone not knowing her might think it took a lot to live with such a beauty. But you see, that was another thing about Sharon with all her beauty. Everyone loved her. I never heard anyone say a bad word about her, not even another actress. And in this town, that's not a rarity, it's an impossibility." Gefsky soon introduced Sharon to Herb Brower, who immediately saw her potential. He thought she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen, and he saw her in big motion productions, introducing her to one of the last old-style producers, Marty Ransohoff. 5 minutes into their first meeting, he called his assistant to draw up a contract and get Sharon's parents, saying, quote, "I'm going to make this girl a star." Since Sharon was only 19 and couldn't sign the contract for herself, her father PJ signed it for her. Soon, Sharon got a small role on the popular television series The Beverly Hillbillies, where she was wearing a wig to hide her blonde hair and appeared for 2 seasons as Janet Trego, the young assistant to the long-suffering Miss Jane, played by Nancy Culp. Ransohoff's plan was easy but effective, giving Sharon discrete parts and small roles at first to learn her craft before signing her to big motion productions. As a result, Sharon learned how to take on the look and the conduct of a movie star, a great transition from her real life. As her sister Patty explained, "In my eyes, there were 2 versions of Sharon. There was her well-groomed public persona, and then there was my sister with her long, straight hair, no makeup, wearing jeans and the t-shirt. The Sharon I identified with slouched when she sat down, bit her nails to the skin, and chewed on her lower lip when she was nervous. Her natural voice had a higher timbre and a slight Texas drawl that thickened when she was excited or tired. There were days when her clumsiness got the best of her, like when she managed to break her leg getting out of bed. Balancing a checkbook was a challenge she didn't care to master, and overcoming her shyness was a constant, well-hidden strain. She had a knack for making a mundane story interesting, and loved to make people laugh. As headstrong as a person could be when she made a decision, an army couldn't change her mind. Chapter 4. The Hairstylist and the Starlet. While her agent and the studio had her trained to be a proper movie star with acting lessons and people teaching her how to behave in interviews, they also gave her a physical makeover, of which one part was getting a new haircut. And for this task, they came to Jay Sebring. Back then, she didn't know how significant that meeting was, how much of a bond they would form, and that they would die side by side. But when they met in October of 1964, they immediately became friends. Jay, whose real name was Thomas John Comer, came from Alabama and had fought in the Korean War before coming to LA to attend beauty school, and later, with only $500 to his name, opened his salon. He worked up to 13 hours a day, sleeping in the back room, and soon became beloved by many Hollywood stars. While the usual haircut at the time cost something between $1 or $2, Jay charged $50 and cut the hair of Hollywood legends like Warren Beatty and Steve McQueen. But not only actors liked to get their hair cut by Jay. He was popular with musicians too. And so one day in the mid-1960s, Jim Morrison went to his salon to get his signature long hairdo cut by Jay. The two became friends, and he later introduced Jim to Sharon and her future husband, Roman Polanski. And Jim even ended up at their wedding. Jay left quite the impact on hairstyling. His way of cutting is still taught in many modern cosmetology schools, and he's often named as one of the biggest influences on modern hairstyling. While not being an actor or working in the movie industry himself, Jay knew everyone, and his connections helped many young actors like Bruce Lee and Sharon launch their careers. Jay had a back room where he would cut the hair of famous Hollywood stars, and that is where Sharon would spend a lot of time in the following years. She sat in the corner, watched Jay work, and got to know Hollywood's in crowd. One day, author Dominic June got a haircut by Jay when he met Sharon. Quote, "She looked so young that I thought at first she was coming here after school. She wore her blonde hair straight and long. She was quiet and friendly and smiled a lot in our conversation." Jay was so proud of her. He couldn't stop looking at her. It was as if he couldn't believe he had a girlfriend that beautiful. I've never seen a guy more madly in love than Jay was with Sharon. But Jay didn't only win Sharon's heart, and soon her entire family was fond of him, and the two decided to get married. Quote, "He done it by the books and arrived early the day before to ask my permission. He actually used the ridiculous words, 'May I have your blessing to take your daughter's hand in marriage?' I stifled a laugh, popped open a couple of beers, and told him, 'Sure, what the hell?' The next day, he and Sharon came over for dinner. In the middle of grilling steaks on the barbecue, Jay got down on one knee and popped the question to Sharon as I watched the romantic spectacle. The urge to laugh was there again, but this time it was stifled by the thought that we got damn lucky to have Jay for our son-in-law. He was a good man and good to Sharon. What more could a father ask for? Her dad PJ recalled. Chapter 5. The Breakthrough and the Breakdown. The 1960s saw a rise in horror films, and soon Sharon would be one of the many actresses gaining fame from those movies. After unsuccessfully auditioning for the role of Liesl in the screen adaptation of The Sound of Music, the studio called her back for another movie titled Eye of the Devil. Sharon hopped on a flight to France, joining her co-stars David Niven and Kim Novak. At first, the director was hesitant to work with her since she was so young and had little to no experience. It was a difficult role, and so they agreed that if, after the first 2 weeks, Sharon was not quite making it, that they would recast her. Sharon portrayed Odile, a mysterious girl with psychic powers, but the camera loved Sharon, and when she appeared on screen, director J. Lee Thompson said, quote, "We all realized that she was a girl who was tremendously exciting. She had that thing that you can't really explain, star projection. I think this girl is going to be a big star." Sharon made a couple more movies before she was signed to make a movie called The Fearless Vampire Killers by Polish up-and-coming director Roman Polanski. I have to intervene here quite briefly because this is how I learned about Sharon Tate. Not only was I in musical theater growing up, and there's obviously an adaptation of The Fearless Vampire Killers, which is a musical, and I was in that, and so to prepare for that, I watched a film, and I really fell in love with Sharon. I am also, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, I'm a big fan of Roman Polanski's work in general, so that is why I just learned a lot about him, and I looked at pictures of him and what he kind of like did and all his work, and I kept coming across Sharon. And I remember the first time that I saw a picture of her, I was like, she's almost too beautiful to be real. Like, Sharon was truly one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen, and she was so tremendously talented as well. Polanski had just gained international fame for his first movie, Knife in the Water, about a husband and wife who are accompanied on a boating trip by a young male hitchhiker who spurs a number of escalating confrontations between the couple. Critically acclaimed and a box office hit, Roman Polanski was on to Hollywood for his next big film. I think it is important to quickly loop here and talk about Roman Polanski for a little. He is a very controversial figure in the art scene, and he's one of the people that constantly comes up when we talk about separating the art from the artist. I read his biography as a teenager because I was so in love with all of his movies. On the list of my top 10 film, there are definitely 3 or 4 directed by him. He's just an incredible director, and his work, especially in the 60s and early 70s, to me is one of the best directing work anyone has ever done. Roman was born in France to Polish parents in 1933, and his family moved to Poland by 1937, getting trapped in the Krakow ghetto. His family was split there and partially killed, but young Roman survived by concealing his Jewish heritage. In his biography, there are gruesome details on how his mother got killed first because she was pregnant, and how his father cut a hole in a fence for young Roman to escape. He wandered the woods for weeks on end until he finally made it somewhere safe. I'm not telling you all of this to justify what he did in his later life, but I think it is important for the rest of the story and Sharon's life story to understand where Roman came from. But by the time Sharon met him, he was just a young, talented director on his way to become one of Hollywood's greatest stars. Before I get into his controversy, I would like to issue a trigger warning here. This next part is going to discuss sexual relationships with a minor, and so if you don't want to listen to that, please just skip ahead. It is the most important thing for me that you feel safe, that you feel good, so I'm going to put a timestamp here. If you don't want to hear about this and you just want to continue with Sharon's life, make sure to skip to this time and I will talk about her again. In 1977, Roman Polanski was arrested and charged with the drugging and raping of a 13-year-old girl. As a result of a plea bargain, he decided to plead guilty to the lesser offense of unlawful sex with a minor. In 1978, after learning that the judge planned to reject this plea deal and impose a prison term instead of probation, Roman fled to Paris. A number of other women have since accused Roman Polanski of raping them when they were teenagers. An Interpol red notice was issued for his arrest, and he rarely leaves France. But he didn't stop working, and he's still making movies, even winning an Academy Award in 2003 that he accepted via Skype. His court case is quite controversial after the young girl, years after all of this happened, forgave him and said that she'd be okay with him back in the country. But because this is an offense against a minor, she cannot decide that, and so if Roman Polanski was ever to set foot back into the United States, he would most likely go to prison. I want to add one more story here because my mother actually once met Roman Polanski in like a short and really random incident. So as said, there's this musical kind of like based on the story, or it is the story, it's just the film but with more musical numbers. And so they premiered it here in Germany, and my mom was doing some sort of work at this big convention hall, and she said she got into an elevator and looked to the side, and she's like, this man looks so familiar. It was this short man. She's like, I knew him from somewhere. And then he left the elevator and said something like, have a good day, with like a thick Polish accent. And she was like, in that moment, she knew it was Roman Polanski. So she didn't talk to him, but I thought that was kind of like a funny story. And it is interesting because people say often that Sharon was so attractive and beautiful, which I absolutely 100% agree with, and that it is interesting that both Jay and Roman weren't like the typical attractive type of the time. and how she was into like shorter guys, intellectuals, and I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, I wanted to add this story here, as well as Roman Polanski's life story, to just give you a little bit of context on Roman Polanski. But for Sharon's life story, all of this doesn't really matter, because Sharon didn't live long enough to be there when all of this happened. In 1967, Roman Polanski was looking for a young actress to be part of his new film, The Fearless Vampire Killers. He originally wanted Jill St. John to play the lead, but Ransohoff insisted Sharon would be a better choice. Sharon went to do a screen test as well as going out to dinner with him 2 times. On both occasions, Roman sat there watching Sharon closely, without either of them saying a word. After their second dinner, Roman invited her back to his apartment, and after lighting candles, he excused himself, leaving Sharon on her own. Quote, "A short while later, he came back storming into the room like a madman, and he was wearing a Frankenstein mask. I let out a blood-curdling scream, and while I was still crying from the scare, he was calling Ransohoff to tell him the part in the film was mine," Sharon recalled. The movie was shot in the Alps, and while Roman was a demanding director, he also threw himself into promoting her, including arranging for her to be on the cover of Vogue, wearing a red wig and a gothic movie costume. She also appeared in character in the March 1967 issue of Playboy, with Roman taking the semi-nude photos of her himself. Chapter 6: Polanski and the Passionate Blonde. By the time filming came to an end, Sharon and Roman were seeing each other, which led to Sharon telling Jay that it was over between the two. Jay insisted on meeting Roman first, and the two went out for dinner, and both admitted to first not really being fond of each other. But eventually they got along great and became friends, with Jay being a big part of Sharon and Roman's life. While Jay on the surface seemed to be happy for the two, it seemed that losing Sharon drove him into a dark world of drugs and self-destruction. He never left her side, with many speculating that he was waiting for Roman to mess up so that he could take his role of Sharon's partner back. But Sharon was madly in love with Roman and ecstatic about her new relationship. Quote, "Roman is strong and so true, so honest. I don't like glamour boys. I've learned a lot about me from being with Roman. My definition of love is being full, complete. It makes everything lighter. Beauty is something you see. Love is something you feel. He's wise and wonderful and brilliant, and he knows everything. I can't play games. I have friends, older women, who tell me I'm foolish to let Roman know how deeply I care about him. They tell me all sorts of things like keep a man guessing. Men become bored with too much devotion. They tell me I am being foolish. Well, foolish I am." And Roman himself felt passionate about her too. Quote, "She was the sweetest, most innocent, lovable human being. She was kindness itself to everybody and everything around her. People, animals, everything. She just didn't have a bad bone in her body. She was a unique person. It's difficult to describe her character. She was just utterly good, the kindest human being ever, met with an extreme patient. To live with me was proof of her patience, because to be near me must be an ordeal. She never had a bad temper. She was never moody. She enjoyed being a wife. The press and the public knew of her physical beauty, but she also had a beautiful soul, and this is something that only her friends knew about." Soon the two were one of the in couples in Hollywood, and while being with Roman, Sharon tried LSD about 16 times, as Roman would say. According to him, she enjoyed it, but feared that if she would take one more trip, her mind would be gone, so she gave it up. Quote, "On one of our first meetings, I had a tiny amount. We split it and then spent all night talking. In the morning, she started flipping out and screaming. I was scared to death. I couldn't do anything for her. Later she said, 'See, I told you, I can't take it anymore. This is the end of it.' And it was the end of it, for her and for me." The two went out to nightclubs, art shows, and concerts, taking short trips to the ocean and Europe. But Sharon was eager to work as an actress. In an interview, she once said, "When I love, I love. I won't marry for a long time. I'll give up acting the second I'm married. I believe a wife must immerse herself completely in her husband and family. And that's what I intend to do. A few women can handle marriage and a career successfully at the same time. I would never marry just to be respectable. It's just a piece of paper and a lovely financial setup. I've learned great happiness from being with Roman that I didn't have before. Why would I want to ruin a perfect affair by trying to get into a mediocre marriage for society's sake?" This is so truly interesting to me because I feel like when we talk about the 1960s, we often talk about how progressive of a time it was. But I feel like people tend to forget how incredibly close the 60s also were to the 1950s. Classic role models of men and women were still the norm, and actresses usually retired as soon as they got married and had kids. However, that point wasn't reached yet, and Sharon quickly followed her success in The Fearless Vampire Killers with a starring role in the comedy Don't Make Waves. Sharon played Malibu, a sexy skydiver who caught the eye of Tony Curtis's character, eager to win her heart. Almost the entire movie was shot on the beach, and while it opened to mixed reviews, Sharon especially was praised for her acting. She made $750 a week, which was good money for a young woman in 1967, and after Eye of the Devil failed to introduce Sharon to the world, her management decided to promote Don't Make Waves as her first picture. To promote her and the movie, pictures of Sharon wearing nothing but a skimpy bikini were distributed, and she became the official spokeswoman for Copper and Suntan Lotion. In one of the ads, Sharon appeared in her famous bikini, being carried on a surfboard by a group of sun-kissed young surfers. There are several people alleging that Sharon was the inspiration behind the Malibu Barbie. The fact that her character was named Malibu, she was bubbly and beautiful and blonde, makes many believe that she was the inspiration behind the famous Malibu Barbie doll. While Sharon loved to travel, she quite enjoyed filming in California because she was so close to her family there. Her sister Patty recalled, "Sharon took me to Malibu Beach while she filmed her scene for the movie Don't Make Waves. I built a sandcastle made of tightly packed walls and towers. Castle construction turned into a group effort when the film crew helped me with the details. The special effects men dug a moat. Tony Curtis placed a small crab in the center and then crowned him the king of the fortress. As a final touch, the prop man placed a miniature flag on the highest towers." Even with her family and the Malibu sunshine, Sharon was unhappy while making the movie. Roman was still in Europe wrapping shooting for The Fearless Vampire Killers that he not only directed but also played one of the leads. Sharon also, like most of the cast, wasn't too excited about Don't Make Waves. It was a silly story that no one really cared for. They all knew the dialogue was flat and the story was boring, but Sharon feared for something else too. With her being promoted as this beautiful blonde in a skimpy bikini, she feared for her career to go into a direction that she didn't care for. Studios considered her a blonde bombshell rather than a serious actress, but Sharon wanted to be in dramas and play more difficult parts. These roles were incredibly hard to get, and both Sharon and her management knew that her beauty was her biggest asset. While she had a lot of talent and was a natural in front of the camera, she hadn't been acting for long enough to be considered for those parts, so her management got her a role in a little movie called Valley of the Dolls. Chapter 7, Valley of the Dolls. Looking back, this would become the part she'd be most known for. In 1967, most people in America had either read or at least heard of the famous Jacqueline Susan novel. So when news of a movie adaptation broke, it caused a stir in Hollywood. Many established and well-known actresses wanted to have a part, and when Sharon landed the role of Jennifer North, many were surprised. While Sharon wasn't too fond of the story, feeling that the book was a little trashy, she also acknowledged its redeeming qualities. Understanding the dynamics of the industry, she believed that delivering a strong performance, even in a bad movie, could open the door to more substantial roles. Valley of the Dolls portrays the lives of three women in the entertainment industry. It explores their pursuit of success, their struggles with addiction to prescription drugs, and the consequences of fame. The movie delved into themes of ambition, friendship, love, and the darker side of Hollywood. Sharon portrayed a character reminiscent of Marilyn Monroe, a superstar shrouded in tragedy whose life ends in suicide. Her role as Jennifer North in the film depicted another archetype, the innocent beauty who enters Hollywood only to be transformed into a tortured soul. Sharon shared similarities with Jennifer. Both were aware of the industry's emphasis on physical appearance and innocence. They were both involved with European art filmmakers. However, Sharon also bore resemblance to Marilyn Monroe, the rumored inspiration for Jennifer's character. Both women were iconic blondes with stunning figures and suffered mistreatment by producers who exploited their sex appeal. Like Marion, Sharon rejected her dumb blonde image to marry an intellectual. Trying to appear less perfect to be considered for different roles, Sharon began to point at her physical flaws. She told friends about the scars on her face, especially one noticeable mark near her left eye. It was done by corrugated tin when she was very young, and she was very proud of it. "It's me," Sharon said. Sharon demonstrated her commitment to advancing her career by enduring the challenges of filming Valley of the Dolls, despite its high cost. The production was beset by numerous problems, with director Mark Robson proving to be particularly difficult to work with, often singling out Sharon for criticism. However, it's possible that he was aiming to help her refine her acting skills, as he later praised her vulnerability to Roman Polanski, acknowledging her promising future. Meanwhile, Judy Garland, facing her own struggles with addiction mirroring those of her characters, had been replaced by Susan Hayward due to her reliability issues. Throughout it all, tension simmered between the other two leads, Patty Duke and Barbara Perkins, each vying for the spotlight and seeking to maximize their roles. When filming had finally wrapped, everyone was relieved. Reflecting on her character, Sharon said, "I am like Jennifer because she's relatively simple, a victim of circumstances beyond her control, but I have more confidence in myself. I'm so afraid of hurting other people's feelings. I don't speak out when I should. I get into big messes. That way I will never be another Marilyn Monroe. But I had to do what they wanted at first. All American men are neurotic. All they care about is having sex." With Valley of the Dolls being filmed in California, her sister Patty was able to visit her a couple of times on set. She recalls sitting next to Sharon in the makeup trailer while they transformed her, applying a heavy base of makeup. They used a light color to conceal her scars and freckles, and a darker one to emphasize the contours of her face. Her eyes were rimmed with black liner and topped with false lashes, and a makeup artist brushed deep brown color onto her light brows. One thing that many people don't know about this movie is that Sharon was actually wearing a wig. And while it looks really similar to Sharon's long and blonde hair, this wig was even longer and even blonder. The costume designers put her in a gold beaded dress as she stood with her back straight and her chin held high. Her voice was 2 octaves lower, with a hint of a European accent. Everything was false, from the top of her head to the lift under her breasts to the red nails on her fingers. It was Sharon the movie star, Patty said. Despite the difficulties of shooting, many were eager for this film to come out. The novel had been a great hit, and costume designer William Travilla praised Sharon in an interview with Screen Stories magazine. "Sharon Tate is divine, a real find. Just wait and see what happens when the critics and public sees her in Valley of the Dolls. Sharon has everything Marilyn Monroe had, and more. She has the fascinating, yet wholly feminine strength of a Dietrich or Garbo, a classically beautiful face, an exciting figure, and the kind of sex appeal and personality appeal to become as glittering a star as Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Rita Hayworth, Lana Turner, and Elizabeth Taylor." On the evening of November 14th in 1967, Valley of the Dolls premiered in Venice, Italy, aboard the cruise liner the Italia, as many movie critics witnessed what they described as one of the most disappointing films of all time. The film was so bad that many in the audience thought it was a comedy. Reviews were overall bad, but the film turned out to be a box office hit. Yet it would take several decades for it to become the cult classic it is nowadays. While Sharon was busy in California filming Valley of the Dolls, Roman was busy in New York filming Rosemary's Baby, starring Mia Farrow. The three became close friends when Sharon met her during one of her visits. While in New York, she also spent time working on a photo shoot for Esquire magazine. The pictures taken during this shoot are particularly memorable, with Sharon posing in a black miniskirt while holding a rifle. And so 1967 ended with Sharon having 4 movies under her belt and her career finally taking off. Meanwhile, Roman and Sharon continued on their silent, non-public ways. They hung out on beaches, away from the Hollywood phoniness, as Sharon puts it, in bars with guys in jeans in Paris and London, where guys walked down King's Road with cowboy hats and rhinestones. Just as Sharon was becoming deep and inextricably a star, she was falling as deeply and inextricably in love, said Barbara Perkins, who starred alongside Sharon in Valley of the Dolls. "I like Sharon and Roman. They do everything they want to do and don't care what anybody says. Upon completing their respective films, Sharon and Roman returned to London, where they established a shared home. They became fixtures on the vibrant London social scene, often spotted alongside luminaries like Mia Farrow, Peter Sellers, and Warren Beatty. Certain publications even dubbed them the groovy couple of the year. Their social calendar brimmed with elite parties, fine dining, and nights at exclusive discotheques. Despite not being married, their unmarried status added to their allure. Considered charming by their circle, they epitomized a rejection of societal norms, embracing love and enjoyment freely. However, in a surprising turn of events, they decided to formalize their relationship, stunning the public. With the decision made, they swiftly organized a grand wedding. Sharon enlisted Barbara Perkins, her co-star from Valley of the Dolls, as her maid of honor, and embarked on the quest to find the perfect wedding gown. I have a replica of Sharon Tate's wedding gown. It is what I wore to my wedding. I'm going to put a picture up here. I was planning on wearing it for this video, but I'm 6 months pregnant and it just doesn't fit. And so enjoy these pictures of Sharon and me in our wedding dresses. I got mine made, well, a friend of mine made this one for me. She has a small business, The Belated Beatnik. I'm gonna link it down below. She sells clothes in general, but you can also commission her with beautiful things. And she made this dress for me, which is a pretty much 100% accurate replica of Sharon's dress, which honestly means the world. Because for as long as I can remember, when I thought about getting married, I knew it was in this dress. So I ended up wearing this dress for today. This is by a wonderful brand called Octopus Garden. They made this from a bedsheet from the 1960s, but there are pictures of Sharon in this dress. I'm just going to put them up here. And because her dress and this dress are quite similar, I decided to wear this one for today. And just like their relationship, this wedding was far from traditional. On January 20th, in 1968, the couple got married, and the Associated Press wrote, "American actress Sharon Tate wore flowers in her hair for her wedding at the Chelsea Register office on Saturday to Polish film director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, a star of the movie Valley of the Dolls, had on a silk mini dress. Polanski also favored green and a Regency-style suit. Miss Tate, 25, said, 'Roman and I plan to stay in England for a week, then we will fly to California for a real honeymoon.'" Another article listed the guest list, which read like a Filmland's who's who. John Mills, Lawrence Harvey, Anthony Newley, Joan Collins, Leslie Caron, Michael Caine, Mike Sard, and Peyton Place girl Barbara Perkins. Musicians Jim Morrison and the Mamas and the Papas also attended the wedding alongside Wojciech Frykowski, who Roman had known since his childhood, and his girlfriend Abigail Folger, heiress to the Coffee Imperium. Their wedding caused a stir in London, with passersby stopping to get a glimpse look at the newlyweds. Sharon and Roman moved into the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles for a few months until they arranged to lease Patty Duke's home on Summit Ridge Drive in Beverly Hills during the latter part of 1968. The Polanski's house was often filled with strangers, and Sharon regarded the casual atmosphere as part of the free spirit of the times, saying that she did not mind who came over to her house, as her motto was "live and let live." Her close friend Leslie Caron commented that the Polanskis were too trusting, quote, "to the point of recklessness," and that she had been alarmed by it. To the outside world, their marriage looked ideal. Robert Evans, a friend of the couple and the producer for Rosemary's Baby, recalled, quote, "Just about the only really happily married couple I knew in Hollywood were Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. Coming from a childhood of horror in Nazi-occupied Poland, Roman couldn't believe he was the husband of this milk-fed American beauty." Sharon's movie career was just beginning to heat up after Valley of the Dolls. But in Roman's eyes, she was already the brightest star in the world. Around his gentle, sun-kissed bride, he was like a child who'd just seen his first Christmas tree light up. In private, however, there were problems from the beginning. For one thing, there was the matter of Sharon's career, and she was reluctant to accept any special help from her influential husband, saying she'd be thrilled to death to do another Polanski film, but he had to ask her first. She wouldn't ever dream of asking him about a part, but would have loved for him to consider her. Sharon also broke ties with Ransohoff, since Roman didn't like him. To do so, she had to promise him 25% of her earnings over the next 4 years. She agreed to do so that she could have the freedom of choosing the more sophisticated roles she'd been after since the beginning. There were also problems between the two of them, with rumors about Roman's infidelity always swirling about. Lawrence Harvey explained, "Marriage vows meant nothing to him, but few men have adored a woman as much as Roman adored Sharon." Most people, though, were certain that Sharon and Roman were deeply in love. After the wedding, Sharon's career was going steadfast when, in March of 1968, Newsweek called Sharon one of the new American beauties, saying, "Astoundingly photogenic and infinitely curvaceous, Sharon Tate is one of the most smashing young things to hit Hollywood in a long time." She began as the invention of wheeler-dealer Marty Ransohoff, and in her 5 years on the Hollywood treadmill, she has surprisingly made progress. In fact, in her last film, Valley of the Dolls, she managed to be the only living doll. Now married to the brilliant and volatile Polish director Roman Polanski, perhaps she will begin to fulfill her tremendous potential. Remembering her husband's repulsion, she dreams, quote, "I'd like to be an American Catherine Deneuve." Alongside Faye Dunaway, Catherine Deneuve was one of Sharon's biggest role models, and she admired how she played the sensitive, beautiful, and deep parts with such grace and intelligence. But Sharon still struggled with her public picture. Sometimes she sighs, "I think it would be better to be a sex symbol, because at least I would know where I was," but, she adds, "quickly I'd lose my mind." I truly think that this is a very interesting, important, but often overlooked aspect of her life. She's always going back and forth about being viewed as this Hollywood sex symbol, but also wanting to do these deeper, more difficult roles. I feel like for some parts, her beauty got in the way, and while she had so much potential, she never got to play those parts. And I truly think that this is one of the biggest tragedies of this story. We will never know what could have happened. Maybe she would have gone on to play these roles, like the women she adored so much. Sharon's first film after leaving Ransohoff was called The Wrecking Crew. Also starring Dean Martin, it was the 4th movie in the Mad Helm action comedy series, and Sharon played Freya Karlsson, a fellow spy posing as a Danish tour guide. She did many of her own stunts, thanks in part to the training she received from Hollywood newcomer and material arts advisor Bruce Lee. This is now a pretty well-known fact after it was so prominently featured in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The two hit it off so well that she invited him to her home, where he also gave Polanski instructions. Like many of the other movies, critics panned it but praised Sharon personally. The Hollywood Reporter review wrote, "Sharon Tate reveals a pleasant affinity to scatterbrained comedy and comes as close to walking away with this pick as she did in a radically different role in Valley of the Dolls." The New York Times agreed, quote, "The only nice thing is Sharon Tate, a tall, really great-looking girl who for most of the movie wanders around wearing glasses, which of course means that no one, including Martin, who's supposedly in a state of constant excitement, noticed that she's beautiful." During this period, Sharon received recognition as a promising newcomer in the industry. She earned a Golden Globe Award nomination for New Star of the Year in the category Actress for her role in Valley of the Dolls, and secured 4th place in the Golden Laurel Awards for the Most Promising Newcomer, following Mia Farrow, Judy Geeson, and Catherine Newton. Additionally, she was named runner-up to Lynn Redgrave in the motion picture's Herald's Poll for The Star of Tomorrow, where box office success was the primary criterion. These accolades signaled an acceleration in her career, reflecting in her negotiation of a $150,000 fee for her next film. Chapter 8: Domestic Dreams in Cielo Drive. Towards the end of 1968, Sharon found out she was pregnant. Both Roman and her were so excited to become parents. They decided to relocate to 10050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles. Previously occupied by their friends Terry Melcher and Candice Bergen, Sharon was elated by the availability of the house, affectionately dubbing it her love house. Despite concerns about the presence of strange individuals at their gatherings, the Polanskis continued to host large gatherings at their new residence, maintaining their popularity among friends. This is one of the 2 connections Sharon and Roman had to the Manson family, but the only one that is 100% provable. Charles Manson originally wanted to be a musician, and when he met Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, they got along quite well. So well, in fact, that Dennis allowed the Manson family to briefly live with him and ended up introducing Charles Manson to record producer Terry Melcher. Manson had written the song Never Learn Not to Love, which the Beach Boys recorded, although crediting it to Dennis. However, Terry didn't really see any potential in Charles Manson and turned him down for a record deal. Some say that this is why he chose the house on Cielo Drive for the murders, not knowing that Terry had moved away almost a year prior. Encouraged by positive reviews of her comedic performances, Sharon opted for the comedy film The 13 Chairs as her next project, largely due to the opportunity to co-star with Orson Welles, whom she admired greatly. In March of 1969, she traveled to Italy to commence filming, while Roman headed to London to work on his next big picture, The Day of the Dolphin. Initially, Roman advised Sharon to prioritize her health and remain at home instead of continuing to work on 13 Chairs. However, she adamantly refused and accompanied him to London in March, then proceeded to Rome to continue filming. Throughout the shoot, director Nicholas Gessner and Luciano Lucignani had to employ numerous tactics to conceal her growing baby bump. Sharon frequently experienced morning sickness and lacked the energy and agility required for the film's action sequences. On many days, she could be found resting off-screen with her swollen feet propped up nearby. Upon completing the film in late July, Sharon flew back to London to reunite with Roman, who was working on Day of the Dolphin. During her time in the city, Terry O'Neill captured a series of candid photos of her shopping for baby clothes, opening baby shower gifts, and looking so excited to become a mother. The charm of these images laid in Sharon's childlike demeanor. This was the same woman who, not too long before, had shared with a reporter her sentimental attachment to childhood things like her teddy bear and old Valentine's boxes, saying that if she would part with them, it would feel like relinquishing her identity as a movie star. Due to her advanced pregnancy, Sharon opted not to fly, and so she returned to America aboard the Queen Elizabeth II, reassured by Roman's promise to join her shortly. Chapter 9, August 8, 1968. At this point, I would like to issue another trigger warning. This next part is going to discuss violence and murder, and if that is something you don't want to listen to today, then please just skip ahead. I'm going to have the timestamp right here, so if that is not up your sleeve today, please be safe and take care of you. The events of the night of August 8th of 1969 at 10050 Cielo Drive remain shrouded in mystery. The Polanski's friends, Wojciech Frykowski and Abigail Folger, had been occupying the house while Sharon and Roman were in Europe, and at Roman's request, they agreed to continue staying there until his return so that Sharon wouldn't be alone. Winifred Chapman, who cleaned the house, arrived as usual in the morning. Roman called around 11 a.m. to check in, assuring his pregnant wife that he would be home at the beginning of the following week. In an effort to lift her spirits during her final weeks of pregnancy, Sharon invited two friends, Joanna Pettit and Barbara Lewis, over for lunch. They departed around 3:30 p.m. and later that evening, Jay Sebring came to visit. I just want to add here, I haven't talked about him for a while in this video, but he was always close with Sharon. And after they broke up, he remained a really close friend and a confidant in Sharon's life. He would often accompany the Polanskis around town and was overall hanging out there a lot. Besides Sharon, Jay, Abigail, and Wojciech, there were two more people present on the property that night. William Gerritsen, the caretaker, made its way to the guest house around 8:30 p.m., still feeling the effects of a hangover from the previous night. By this time, Sharon and her friends had decided to dine at the El Coyote Cafe on Beverly Boulevard. According to waitress Kathy Palmer, who served them food and drinks, the group departed sometime around 10 p.m. Shortly before midnight, Stephen Parent came to visit William Gerritsen at the guest house. The two had crossed paths a couple weeks earlier, when 18-year-old Steve had given William a ride to the estate. After sharing a beer and a conversation, Steve made a brief phone call and informed William of his departure. He then left in his white Rambler, driving slowly up the driveway and stopping to activate the automatic gate. That's where he met Tex Watson, member of the Manson family. For those of you who have never heard about the Manson family, let me explain who they were and how all of this came to be. The Manson family was a cult led by Charles Manson in the late 1960s. Manson was, as earlier mentioned, a failed musical artist who in the late 1960s had started gathering many young people, especially women around him, who were loyal to him and did as he told them. Manson believed in an apocalyptic race war, which he called helter-skelter, and he manipulated his followers into carrying out violent acts in hopes of inciting this war. I know this all sounds pretty insane and like something out of a Hollywood movie, but as gruesome as it is what happened. A lot of these young women would later state that they were brainwashed into doing these things and that Charles Manson was prying on their vulnerability. But all of that didn't matter that one fateful night in August of 1969. While pausing to activate the automatic gate, Steve Perrin encountered Tex Watson, who was, as said, a member of the soon-to-be notorious Manson family. As fate would have it, neither Charles Manson nor his followers knew who lived in the house and who was present on the estate that night. However, Tex Watson had been to the estate before. As mentioned earlier, the Polanskis had this very open house policy, and they really opened their doors to everyone and anyone who came by. And so one night, Tex Watson had already been to a party at their house. This is the second tie between the Manson family and the Polanskis. Tex Watson shot Steve Perrin at point blank. Watson signaled to the three other family members accompanying him, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to follow him up the driveway to the house. Upon reaching the house, Kasabian appeared visibly shaken, prompting Watson to instruct her to return to the car and wait there, while he and the other two women proceeded to carry out their task. While only being there for this first little bit, Linda Kasabian played a significant role in the prosecution of the other Manson family members. She was gained immunity for her testimony as the key witness against the other Manson family members. Therefore, she was one of the two people that were on the property that night who didn't die or spent the rest of their lives in prison. She died in January of 2023 in Washington. The murders were gruesome, and I really don't want to go into too much detail here. The four people in the home were made to gather in the living room, and Sharon and Jay were linked together by a tie tied around their necks. They were strangled and stabbed multiple times each. Wojciech and Abigail managed to free themselves and flee the house, but both were chased down and stabbed multiple times on the lawn. Susan Atkins used some of Sharon's blood to write the word pig on the front door. She later said that when she dipped her fingers in the blood, she could hear gurgling sounds, like blood flowing into the body out of the heart. Incredibly, even though Sharon was stabbed 16 times, not a single stab wound injured her baby, a little boy who died of the lack of oxygen about 20 minutes after his mother's death. Roman would name him Paul Richard Polanski. This truly is one of the most gruesome murders I've ever read about. The autopsy is largely available in books and online, and there you can read every single brutal detail. What broke me in particular was the part about Sharon's baby. Sharon was already quite far along in her pregnancy, and that baby could have survived by himself. So while many say it was 5 people who died that night, I would like to correct that and say that it really was 6 people who lost their lives that night. After it was over, the 3 Manson family members got into their car where Linda Kasabian was waiting, and all 4 of them vanished into the night. On the next morning, August 9th, at around 8 a.m., Winifred Chapman came to the property and discovered a bloodbath. The police was called and they arrested William Garretson, who was still sleeping in the guest house, for murder. They ended up keeping him in custody for 2 more days before releasing him. He had to do a polygraph test and was asked countless questions, but soon the police realized that he had nothing helping to solve the murders to tell. Upon learning about the murders over the phone, Roman Polanski rushed back to California. Following the police, soon came the paparazzi, and in short time, headlines were making their way across the country as people learned of Sharon Tate's tragic death. And soon everyone started to ask questions. Sharon, it was fantastic what they were attributing to her in death. They made a monster out of the sweetest, most innocent, lovable human being. She was kindness itself to everybody and everything around her. People, animals, everything. Roman Polanski later said in an interview. Roman, with the help of Sharon's family, planned a traditional Catholic funeral, and Sharon was buried, holding her baby boy in her arms. Even on the day of her burial, the press speculated to the nature of the gruesome murders. One television news report announced, "It's been a day of farewell to the victims of a shooting and stabbing rampage that included actress Sharon Tate and 4 others. There was talk of drugs and a mad killer, but the Los Angeles police reports no developments in the search for the killer or killers that cut the telephone line to the home in Benedict Canyon and carried out what police are describing as a methodical and ritualistic mass murder. All 5 victims died of multiple stab wounds, gunshots, and bludgeoning. Miss Tate and Jay Sebring were found in the living room, bound together by a white nylon rope. Tate, in her bikini bra and panties, was hung before her death." Because of how gruesome and out of anything anyone could have ever imagined these murders were, speculation started quickly. Soon the entire city was filled with people gossiping about what happened and trying to figure out what could have been behind it. Some suspected that the group was amusing itself with some sort of black magic rites as well as drugs that night, and they mentioned a Jamaican with a knack for voodoo who had recently been brought to Wojciech's drug operations. There were many speculations that the murders resolved from a ritual mock execution that had gone out of hand at the glance of hallucinogenics. Roman agreed to a Life magazine article that featured photographs of him sitting next to the entrance door with the word pig smeared on it. He's also seen in the living room with blood splattered across the floor. They wrote, quote, "You wouldn't believe how weird these people were. If you live like that, what do you expect? Their circle may have been friendly enough to protect them in their lifetime, but now in their posthumous notoriety, rumor had revealed them to all the connoisseurs of depravity. Figures torn from life that was pure the Sade with videotape machines in the bedrooms." I honestly think that this goes back to what I was talking earlier about how the 1960s were still so incredibly close to the 1950s. Even at the end of the decade, they were very close to the 50s, especially when it came to the mindset. The way that Sharon and Roman lived, how they went out to party, and how free-spirited they were, was really weird to most Americans who still lived a rather traditional life. I think what happened after their deaths is absolutely horrible, but because they didn't fit the social standard, the rumors about them were gruesome. By the end of 1969, most members of the Manson family had been arrested for what police thought was a big car theft ring. This was another thing that people often get hung up about when talking about Sharon's death. Why did it take the police so long to figure out what happened? The night after the murders in the Polanski house, 6 members of the Manson family, including Tex Watson and Charles Manson himself, murdered the LaBiancas, a couple living in the same area as Sharon and Roman did. It took the police ages to figure out that these 2 crimes were connected, even though they were executed almost similarly. But finally, the police had a major breakthrough when someone reported what Susan Atkins had told her. Susan Atkins had apparently gone around Hollywood bragging about her role in several murders, saying that she and the Manson family had been up to no good. Soon they were arrested after being initially let go for the car theft thing. On June 15th of 1970, the trial began. It was a bizarre happening with the Manson family members wearing long dresses and singing songs. They were constantly disruptive throughout the entire trial, and many questioned whether they wanted to appear insane or whether they really were. Eventually, after Linda Kasabian was granted immunity in return for her testimony, she told prosecutors what happened, and Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, Tex Watts, and Patricia Krenwinkel were each charged with 7 counts of murder. On January 25th of 1971, the jury returned a guilty verdict against all 4 defendants on all counts against them, and on April 19th of 1971, the judge sentenced them to death. However, before their prosecutions could be carried out, the California Supreme Court abolished the death penalty, so their sentences were converted to life in prison. Every couple of years, the Manson family members will try to apply for parole, with Sharon's mother, Doris, and her sisters, Patty and Deborah, raising awareness and hosting petitions with millions of signatures, making sure that the Manson family stays incarcerated. Alright dolls, I have to quickly pause the video here to share some very recent news. Last Friday, on May 30th of 2025, Patricia Krenwinkel, the longest-serving female inmate in California, was recommended for parole by a state panel. Krenwinkel, who is now 77, was convicted in 1971 for her role in the 1969 Tate and LaBianca murders, including the brutal killing of Abigail Folger and the writing of messages in blood at crime scenes. One newspaper reports, over the years, Krenwinkel has expressed remorse and attributed her involvement to psychological control, drug use, and fear during her time with the Manson family. Despite 14 prior parole denials, this recommendation now awaits approval from the full Board of Parole hearings and Governor Gavin Newsom, who previously reversed a similar recommendation in 2022. The review process can take up to 150 days. Sharon's sister Deborah released a petition to keep her incarcerated right away, writing, quote, "The board will review its decision for 120 days. Then Governor Newsom will have up to 30 days to decide if this decision will stand or be reversed, blocking her release." She went on writing, "For years, this woman laughed about the murders in court and showed absolutely no remorse at all. She admits she was not on drugs the night of the murders and committed them to ignite a race war. Society cannot allow the serial killer who committed such horrible, gruesome, random killings back out, and I am asking for your help by letting the parole board know that you do not want to see her get released by signing this petition." The 8 victims of the Tate-LaBianca murders, which includes Sharon's unborn son, deserve justice. This woman was originally sentenced to die in the gas chamber, but her sentence was commuted to life in prison, which is where she should spend the rest of her life. I will have her petition, which of course I signed right away, and which also includes information on how to write to the governor directly, linked under this video, and I would like to encourage and urge you to take a look at it, share it, and support it. Chapter 10. A Legacy in Light and Shadow. The murders were so senseless, so evil, that they nearly swallowed who she was. For years, even decades, Sharon's name was spoken as a part of a list, a casualty, a headline, a symbol of something too awful to understand. The fear, the shock, the myth of the Manson family, all of it clung to her like a second skin, obscuring the woman she had been. And yet, somehow, the memory of Sharon persisted. Soft, golden, and luminous, she became something of a mirage in the collective imagination, the quintessential 60s starlet, forever young, forever gentle. Photographs of her in the late afternoon light, laughing with her dog, or lounging barefoot in a paisley dress became iconic not just for their beauty, but because they captured something more elusive, the soul of a woman the world barely got to know. Friends remembered her as warm and funny, the kind of person who put others to ease instantly. She called her mother every day. She loved to cook. She giggled when she tipped over her words. She was deeply in love, and she was waiting to become a mother. These are the pieces we're left with. Not just the tragedy, but the texture of a life that shimmered quietly. Doris Tate, who had such a close and loving bond with her daughter Sharon, passed away in July of 1992 and was buried next to her daughter. Sharon's younger sister Patty went into acting as well and passed away in 2000. She was survived by her father, P.J. Tate, who eventually passed in 2005, and her sister Deborah Tate, who still lives to this day, raising awareness for Sharon's story and advocating against the Manson family's wish for parole. Sharon was also survived by her husband, Roman Polanski, who, after fleeing America, is now living in Paris. And still, the images of Sharon endure, not because they're eerie, but because they're impossibly alive. Her face turned toward the sun, eyes half closed in a dreamy squint, hair caught in a breeze, somewhere between laughter and thought. She remains a haunting kind of beautiful, not because of how her life ended, but because of everything it promised. A gentleness, a radiance, a joy just beginning to bloom. Sharon Tate lives in the spaces between memory and myth, in the quiet instance of those who loved her, in the soft defiance of a smile that won't be erased. She didn't vanish, she was taken, but not forgotten, and not reduced. She remains forever paused in a moment of becoming. Looking back on Sharon's life, her former roommate, Sheila Wells, with whom she had shared that small apartment at the beginning of their careers, their dogs always underfoot, reflected on those early days and on the Sharon she knew. Quote, "In just the last few months, Sharon was beginning to come into her own. She never cared about being beautiful. She never really cared about acting. She just wanted to love and be loved. I can't believe that the murderers knew her. To know Sharon, to really know her, was to love her. There's just no way that anyone who knew her could have hurt her." And so we reached the end of this story, one that has taken me on an emotional roller coaster to tell. I've been fascinated by Sharon for so many years, not just because of her beauty, but because of the quiet mystery that surrounded her and the aching what if that always lingers. What would have happened if she had lived beyond that night? Would she have quit acting to raise her children in peace away from the cameras? Or would she have stepped back into the spotlight, finally choosing the roles she longed to play, coming into her own as both an artist and a mother? We'll never know. No one ever will. But what we do have, what remains, is the echo of her spirit, caught in film reels and laughter, in sunlight and memory. Not just a tragic figure, but a woman full of promise, a life that tragically ended too soon, ended but never faded. So that is it for today's video. That is it for the incredible life of Sharon Tate. As said, I wanted to tell this story because Sharon is such a big inspiration to me, and it breaks my heart how people are always reducing her to the victim of this horrible crime, and people often oversee what an incredible actress she was. She was such a promising young woman, and she had so much ahead of her, and it truly breaks my heart that she never got to play these roles that she really wanted, because I feel like with the years and with her maturing a little more, she would have probably become one of Hollywood's finest actresses. But yeah, I would really love to know what you think about all of this. Obviously, this is a very heartbreaking, really, really sad story, but I would also like to know what you think about Sharon, her life. Obviously, the Manson family, I was thinking about maybe one day making a separate video about them, because there's this whole thing about how these murders really much ended the whole summer of love and hippie movement, basically. So I feel like that's a topic for another day, because today I wanted to put the spotlight on Sharon and not her murderers. So that is it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with a friend. It supports me, it supports the channel, and it would truly mean the world. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls!